Jai Baba. It's wonderful to be here and see all the Baba faces are the same all the way across the country, smiling, and you know that Baba is in your hearts. I was thinking this, what should I talk about? And I thought, people say, how did you come to Baba? And I realized that the day you're born, you come to Baba. Your life leads up to your the thing that will bring you to Baba. I lived in Virginia when I was young, and you all know the Kashoutis, Keach and Henry Kashouti. Well, Keach and I grew up together in Williamsburg, Virginia, and as children we used to sit around talking, what is the secret of life, and is there a secret to life, and do you think we'll ever find out what it is? Well, back in 1955, I was living up in New York going to art school. And I was very unhappy with my life, very, very disturbed. And it dawned on me that it was my own fault. If I was unhappy, I was responsible for my own unhappiness. So at the same time, I called Keach and Henry on the phone. And Keach said, we found the secret of life, we know what it's all about. So we went to, I went down to visit them. And Henry had become interested in this group called, it was about cosmic consciousness with Dr. Walter Russell. And so I went down to Keach and Henry's, his other friends, and Henry told us all about it. And what it was that God was inside of all of us, that we were all God, and that's what life was all about, was to discover our own divinity. And it was like somebody threw a switch. That's what it was all about. So for 3 weeks, I just walked on a cloud. I hadn't experienced anything like that since I was in college and took my first philosophy course. Up until that time, I was raised in a family that was very materialistic, very interested in just money and real estate and restaurant business, and that's all they would discuss. And when I heard things about Plato and Socrates, I couldn't believe there was this other whole inner world that was just wonderful. So, this experience that I'd had in college now lasted for 3 weeks, and I call it my spiritual awakening. So for 2 or 3 years, Keach and Henry and I corresponded, we kept in touch. Everything we found in the way of new books, we'd send them back and forth. In 1955, I went walking, I was living in New York at the time, going to art school, as I said. I walked by a Doubleday bookstore, and there was God Speaks in the window. And I looked at the picture. Up until that time, with all the other things I had been reading, I knew that I needed a master, because I had been reading and reading and reading, and I thought, just by reading, you know, I'm going to get God realization someday, because of the experience I had from reading before. So I saw God Speaks, and I thought, oh, I love the picture of Baba on the cover. I went in and bought the book, and went home, and I read it, and read it. I don't understand a word, but this is wonderful. This man knows what he's talking about. He's the first one I've read that experienced, and he's come down and telling us all about it. So I went back, this was December of 55. I went back to the bookstore about 2 weeks later, it was just before Christmas, and I thought, I'll buy a copy for Keach and Henry and send it to Williamsburg for them. I got in the bookstore, it wasn't in the window, it wasn't in the store, and the salesman had to go down to the basement to dig one out for me. I guess they hadn't been selling very well. In those days, well, even now today, you know, books like this just don't sell out well, as you well know. Unless you're Baba people, it's hard to sell Baba books. So I got a copy for Keach and Henry and sent it to them, and I was perfectly content to stay at home, read about Baba, and get God realization. Henry called and said, where is this man? I have to meet this man. I want to know where he is. So he got the society, bought lots of books there, and we went all down Park Avenue with all the bookstores and looked for more esoteric books. And then we got to the Del Monico Hotel. Well, as I entered the first room, it was up on a balcony, like in the hotel. The first room was, everybody was there where you'd register, and Adele was there, and Adele, John Bass, Phyllis. And as I went in, I saw the desk and I registered and I bought the discourses. I hadn't realized up until then that I had been running away from life. That's why I bought these books and just stayed home and read and read and read. And the first thing I did was open the discourses, and it said, life is not an escape, spiritual life is not an escape from life. And anytime I've ever gotten a message from Bob of any kind internally, it's always kind of like a bolt right through the brain and the heart. And and I thought when I met a master, I was going to just be touched by it and be God realized. Actually, I had also been looking for a master for a long time. With all the reading we'd done, I knew I needed help. I had gone to art school. I had a master teacher, a master art teacher, and I knew that if you find a teacher that's that good, you turn yourself over to him, and he would teach each one individually. He didn't have any rules and regulations. So I knew something about being a disciple or an apprentice. So I knew I needed help. I needed a teacher. So I used to go up and down the streets in New York City. I used to look at the subway. I thought, maybe today I'll meet my master. And of course, when I found God Speaks, I had been going up and down the streets looking for my master. When I did get to the Hotel Del Monico, I bought the book and opened it up, and bang, oh, the first thing Baba hit. Then there was a room to the right where Baba was. It was a long room, and Baba was seated in the chaise at the end of the room. And I went in, and as I was walking down this long way, it was the longest walk of my life. It was like a person who drowns or is drowning, and they feel like their life is flashing in front of them. Everything that was significant and important to me, just those several steps, was just rushing through my mind. When I got to Baba, Erich was interpreting, and I get the 2 days mixed up, excuse me. Baba and Erich were together, and Baba asked through Erich, "Have you read any of my books?" And I said yes, and I pictured God Speaks. And every time I picture God Speaks now and then, I picture universes and stars, because that's what I pictured when I was reading the book. And Baba said, "Good. Keep reading my books, and you'll know eternal bliss and joy." I said, "Okay." So I went back. I left the room. Baba gave me a grape, and I ate it and went out. And met Keacher and Henry outside in the hall. They had met him already. And I realized that God wasn't, Master was not just going to touch me, and I was not going to be God realized. And I had to live my own life. I had to experience my own life. I had to walk my own path, but with this wonderful Master that I had met. And that I couldn't escape from life anymore by reading books. And this was all in 5 minutes. That's what it was like to meet Bob. It was always. You can live in all kinds of an illusionary world and read and picture yourself as being on the 7th plane, the 6th plane, the 5th plane, or being spiritual, or being this or being that. But when you confronted Baba, that mirror was there that was so incredible that you saw yourself. And sometimes you wanted to run and hide. But he was, it was quite an experience to meet him. Then we went back again. A couple of days later, we found out that we could meet him again. It wasn't just the one day. So I went back, and the second day I walked in. As I walked down the long passageway there, I saw Baba looked like he was lit up at the other end of the room, and I started looking for spotlights. I thought, oh, they're taking pictures of it. And I didn't see any. And it just was one of those things that feels very soft, and it was like amber with light shining through it. And I realized the light coming from inside of him. He had me sit down on the chaise that day, and he took my hand and started patting it. I felt a little uncomfortable. And I said, I was here yesterday. And Baba said, okay, and patted my head. And I said, My name is Elizabeth Sacalis. Baba said, yes, I know. He patted my head. Then I suddenly, I don't know where it all came from, I leaned over and embraced him and he embraced me, and I kissed him on the cheek, and I thought, why am I kissing a stranger? And at the same time as I kissed him, I realized that he was everybody I had ever loved before in my life. And he gave me another grape, and I went out. And as I walked around and came back into the other room where Fred and Ella and everybody else was, I could see him down the corridor, and all the Baba people around, Ivy Deuce and the important people were there. And I thought, well, he's my master, and he's the way, even though I have to go through my own life. Myself. When the following Monday, they used to have Monday night meetings in New York City. Following Monday night, I went banging on Fred and Ella's door because I wanted to attend the meeting. And Ella opened the door and she said, "Oh, my dear, I'm sorry, but we're packing to go to Myrtle Beach with Baba." And we knew nothing about the trip down there. But for those 2 minutes that I was with Baba each day, it was enough. I knew that to absorb and understand and comprehend for maybe the rest of my life, to try and sort it all out. That's always the way I felt when I met Baba. I've had enough in 2 minutes to try and understand what I'm supposed to understand in this one lifetime. So the idea of going down to Myrtle Beach never occurred to me. It was too late to make plans anyway, but we didn't know about it. And we were given all we were supposed to be given, I guess. But I went banging on the door, and I wanted to attend the meetings, and I had to wait a few weeks before they came back to attend the meetings. And it wasn't for the meetings, because I was never a meetings person. I was never a group person. But I wanted to be with Baba people. I wanted to hear Baba stories. The thing that's so difficult now is being one of the people having to give and had been taking for so long from the other Baba people, from the older ones, getting information from them, and now I have to give, and it's like a child having to grow up all of a sudden. But it was years and years later when I thought I didn't love Baba that I remembered how I went banging on that door, and that incredible fire that Baba gives you, that you want to be with him, you want to know about him, that came back into my mind, made me realize, well, yes, you do love him, you dummy. We used to go to the Monday night meetings, and I don't know if any of you knew of or heard of Beryl Williams. And she was so patient and so knowledgeable. And we used to have, the real meetings started after the meetings. We used to go and have coffee clutches of delicatessens in any place we could find. And we'd talk until midnight, and she'd tell stories. It was just so wonderful. And she always was very accurate, had all the facts. She was just one of the most beautiful people I've ever known. Just a lovely person. So that was my life from then until 1958. It was the Baba group in New York City, and going in and out all the time. When I talk about having, when you're born, you start looking for Baba. I was born into a family, as I told you, that was very materialistic, and my father actually was very fascist. He's an Eastern or Mid-Eastern from Greece, Turkey actually, and he's he controls everything in the family. And I have found that even up until, my father's still alive, by the way, my father and mother, in the 90s and 80s. And they've been a very, very strong influence on us, and they're very anti-Baba. I mean, very anti-Baba. They had detectives come after us. You know Ann Conlin? Well, we had to go see detectives in New York City because they had sent anonymous letters to the police in New York City about Baba being having drugs and all kinds of things in this group. Just contrary to what Baba is, of course. So I also came home one day and found a letter in the mailbox that my parents had made. I always, mind you, I was about 27, 28 years old, and I found a letter from Grasslands Hospital, which is a big complex in our area, where they have psychiatric centers and everything, and they had made an appointment for me to try and fix me with a therapist. Of course, I just disregarded the whole thing. But here, they're always trying to control our lives and tell us how terrible Baba was and how we were on the wrong track. So, I'm still doing it. As a matter of fact, not only were our lives affected, but Fred and Ella's lives were affected too, because they were called in by the detectives since the meetings were held at their house, their apartment. And we no longer could have the meetings at their apartment after that. He almost lost his job where he worked because of it. It's no fun being involved with fascists. That's the story up until then. Are there any questions? Anything anybody would like to tell you?
How about 1958?
That's going to be when my sister and I talk together. A couple of nights from now. Tomorrow night. Okay.
Did you ever contact Baba about your parents' resistance? Did you give you any advice or word of encouragement?
That happened in 58, and it's a very unusual story because we didn't want to bring up our parents, and Baba did. And we'll tell you that too. We didn't think it was the problem. Baba knew it was and still is. I didn't think that's what my life was going to be about, my parents, but it still is. And that seems to be the big focus. Yes, of course it all involved just learning how to love Baba. And this business of my fascist father, I had a lot of problems loving Baba. That's why I told you before that when I realized how I was so fired to see Baba and know about him, that I really did love Baba, but I was also very afraid of him. I was really terrified of him because I thought Baba was going to be like my father. Very controlling and very... my father was never physically abusive to us, but he's always been emotionally and psychologically abusive. You're just girls, you're good for nothing, you're stupid, you can't do this, you can't do that sort of thing. You don't know what you're talking about. So we were abused, my sister and I, in that way. But I thought Baba was going to be just like him. And I had to deal with it. No, my mother is now in a nursing home in La La Land because of my father. She finally gave up. She was the go-between between my father and us, and had to play both sides all the time. And she never could do anything right with him, so she just gave up. No. No, we never thought to do anything like that. Daddy's always right. No. This is fascist within a family. Yes. The father is the head of the household, and he controls everything, and he meddles in your lives. As a matter of fact, one time he asked us if I want. This is what he's saying. If I wanted to get on a rocket ship and go to the moon tomorrow, would you let me? And we said, well, of course we would. He said, that's terrible. And love to him was everybody being enmeshed and being involved in everybody else's life and telling everybody what to do, and that's what love is. And it's completely contrary to Bob. Completely contrary. One night, Ann Conlin and I went into the New York meeting when it was still held at Fred and Ella's apartment, the first one. And it was dark outside. It was a brownstone building. We were just going up the stairs, and this figure came out of the dark. And it was my father. They lived in Virginia at the time. And he came out, and he came up to me, and he said, I was going in with Beryl Wiggins and her sister Bernice and some other Bible people, going to go up the steps. And he said, you don't belong with these people. These aren't your people. And I looked at him as if he was a total stranger and went right on up. He also went to Fred and Ella's apartment one time and introduced himself as somebody named Janus to see what his, yeah. Yeah. But then after that, the whole detective episode came along. So our whole lives have been this terrible struggle against, and there's still this terrible feeling that my father was right, and it's, from the time you're small, you're raised with this family whose, your first impressions are that they are right.
Yes, I just wondered if you ever, well, you kind of just answered what you said, but it's something that do you ever just, even though you have feelings you like your father, you ever have a time where you just love him?
Oh, yes, and only through Bob.
You love him and you think, am I wrong about that?
Always, that's what the trouble was. Always the trouble is tearing of Daddy's always right. But on the other hand, also, but also Daddy is, I'm beginning to realize.
I'm thinking of husband, and I'm telling you that it's the same thing.
Yes. But it probably goes back.
Father. No, I'm father too.
Yes, sure. Yes, it continues.
You get in a habit of thinking that way.
Yes. 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 Oh, and my father is a very, very powerful Hermes writer. Heard about him, and he said he must have been a very strong, powerful, historical figure because he's bigger than life. He's like a cartoon, which makes it easier now. It makes it easier now. He is a cartoon character, and I know he's going to get there first to borrow. Really, he hates Bob because he was. Number one, he was God and was controlling everything. Very difficult. I wanted to obey Baba, but I was terrified of it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I really wanted to and thought I did obey him. And would be willing to, but I didn't realize how afraid of him I was. And I didn't realize how afraid of him I was till I realized it was because of my father. And the control he had over me as a child and the things that he did and said.
Are there other children in there?
No, just the two of us. All the other ones died. They didn't want to be around.
There's a picture of Baba in the original kitchen.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I can't draw anymore. I make stick figures. I can't draw. Since I met Baba the second time, everything's gone. I was sculpting ahead of him one day, and first he looked like Adolf Manju. Then he looked like everybody else I'd known in the world, and that's it. The stuff is all in the attic. I can't do it anymore. Adele. That's Ginny's story. She has to talk yet today. That's her bird.
The first time you met Baba, did you know already was his master? Or was it actually second?
It was almost like I knew he was my master when I got God Speaks. And it was just a matter of going through the steps. And I thought he was going to be my master and touch me and make me God realize. And I was a little disappointed that I wasn't. But then I had to go through this thing of realizing, well, yes, he was the way, and I have to experience my own life.
Did you stop looking after that?
Oh, yes. Everything is interesting, but it all points back to Baba now. We read psychology books, therapy, all kinds of stuff. We read anything that comes along that's of interest. But it all, because it only, as Baba said, you all speak through me. And some of these wonderful books also are Baba speaking. What did I say? I speak what I say. That's wrong. Okay. Baba didn't even speak, did he? Way back? Why am I afraid of Baba? I don't know. If I were to meet him today, I'd probably be a little scared. But at least I'd be aware of it. It was a lot of denial, and I didn't know I was afraid at the time. I pretended I wasn't afraid. I love Baba, I love Baba, I love Baba, and I was really afraid.
What kind of an impression did it set Baba
I thought, well, he looked just like the picture in the inside flap. It was the original God Speaks had Baba sitting on a tiger skin. And physically, he looked the same.
But how did it affect you
Mentally?
Did it leave a different impact on you versus
It was, well, seeing the mirror, yes. It was all that happened was the awareness that life was not an escape from, spiritual life was not an escape from life. All those things came down on me very quickly. Meeting him. It wasn't just like sitting home reading the book and seeing the planes in my imagination, thinking I was going to be God realized. It was bang, right back down to earth.
Yes, maybe you had an artistic sense when you met Baba and you described the tactile sense of the skin and you described the visual sense of the light and the color. Did you have any auditory or smell?
The smell, always the smell.
What was that?
It's a smell that I don't know, I can't imagine it until I smell it, and then it comes over me like an incredible wave. I went back to India in '83 in Baba's bedroom alone, and the smell came over me, and I just sat there and wept. And I don't expect experiences of any kind, because after the first experience I had with the 3 weeks after Keitra and Henry's house, and then I went back to Myrtle Beach in '60 and went into Baba's house and had another experience like that. It lasted about a week, and after that I didn't look for experiences anymore. And I just live as an ordinary human being. I realized after meeting Baba, I'm gross conscious, and that's what I am, and that's where I'm at. But when I went back into, after all those years, it was 58 when I saw him in Myrtle Beach, when I smelled his the essence. In '83 when I went back to India. And I went in his room, and this aroma came over me, and I knew it was Baba's essence. I couldn't believe it. It just absolutely floored me. And I thought, he does love me.
Did you go in 1962?
Yes.
You can tell about that.
No, 62, we were such a large group that it was just a couple of incidences. What did happen was Baba was up on the stage, and we came in and we met him. And what had happened was, I guess I had been exhausted from the trip, the preparation. Always exhaustion before we met Baba. And it's like, it was almost done on purpose. To get ready, and so you're in a state of collapse by the time you get there. And then you were more vulnerable. And Baba can really, really get to you when you're that way. So I had been slightly sick. So when I got up to meet Baba, he said, "How are you now?" And I stood back and I thought, how am I now? And I thought, I felt fine. So I told Baba, I said, when I was over there, I felt sick. Now that I'm here in front of you, I feel fine. And he laughed and laughed. And I went off the other side, got to the other side, and I felt sick again. But most of the time when I talked to Baba, I made him laugh. For some, I say something, childish and stupid, he'd laugh. And I thought, well, at least I made Baba laugh. But that was the only real thing that I remember about the '62 Sahavas. And most of the time we just sat around in a huge group in front of them, sweltering in the sun, or we had monsoon rains and everything floated around on the ground. And I felt for the first time, that was the first time that I felt like I was his child. Up until then, I had been almost in competition with him, too. Every time I was with Baba, I felt like an idiot. And absolutely, you feel this big because you want to be close to Baba, but he was so extraordinary and so bigger than life, so much bigger than life, that you couldn't follow him. You couldn't keep up with him. He'd say a simple little thing, and you couldn't comprehend it. I'd be around other people afterwards, and they'd talk and talk, and it was all gibberish. Everything was gibberish that we did on this planet, except for Baba. So there was almost a little competition. I felt like, well, I'd like to be a master or something like that. I'd like to be, at least on a plane or something. And yet I couldn't understand the simplest thing that Baba said. So there was a little twist in there. The ego, you know how the ego is. But in '62, when I went to India, I had by then been resigned that I was his child and I was a moron. And I was just his child sitting at his feet. I'm perfectly happy to do that.
Did Baba ever give you any individual orders?
We were afraid of individual orders because you'd have to obey them. And if you didn't obey them, you were in big trouble. We did get orders all the time, days of silence or this, that, and the other thing. And he did tell us some of the things that were general. Like when we met him in '58 in the barn. In '58 in Myrtle Beach, things were much more intimate in the Sahavas. We were there for 2 weeks, the group was smaller, and we constantly were in contact with them. '62 was very vast. '56 in New York, it was just a few minutes at the Del Monico. Where's my life at currently? Here? Well, we, just wherever it takes us. I live in Westchester. I have a house. I take care of it. I have a dog who I miss terribly. We read about Baba. We try and straighten out our heads. Our parents, we have one in a nursing home. My father was crazy. Calls us on the phone and dumps on us constantly. We do the best we can from 1 minute to the next, and that's about it. For the moment, absolutely. That's what we learned from Baba. I never felt like I left Baba. There were times I was afraid I was leaving him, but I never felt like I left him. I'd catch myself doing things that I felt maybe this would take me away from Baba, but I was always aware of him, always. I'm blind on the right side, obviously.
I was what you had said about after you met Baba, you wanted to be an artist, and then you sometimes couldn't do art. I was
I went to art school, had one of the best teachers, a portrait painter teacher in the world, and I suppose I could have had a wonderful career. I don't know. But I just, I guess I learned to paint and draw from the time I was very small. I used to draw all the time. And I thought I was going to be an artist when I grew up. But after I met Baba, I realized that I had used art as a substitute for speaking, for communicating with people. And I just learned to communicate, I guess. No. This, Baba is number one. Everything else revolves around Baba in our lives.
So then, what did you do with your life? To be an artist, go into communication, broadcasting?
I dabbled in everything. I've been in electronics. I worked in a TV repair shop for 11 years. Nothing big, nothing like Hollywood. Just repairing TV sets and things for 11 years. Then I went to auto mechanics. I did a lot of sports when I was younger, athletics, and I've never had to worry about money so far. Of course, my father's threatened to disinherit us for 30 years now, and he may at any time. Because of following Baba. But so far we've had, my sister and I have had money because of his business. And he's been very good to us that way. But then that's Baba's gift to us too, so that we could follow him without having to worry.
Also, you mentioned that you felt that you never necessarily wanted to leave Baba, but that you had lost the initial feeling of fire that he gave you. Did you go through a period where it was sort of down for
Yes, but then the fire was artificial. Now the real love for him is a mellower thing. It's not hysterical.
You seem to have implied that you had some therapy and stuff around your
I didn't go into grassland. But my sister has always been very interested in understanding why. She was a young person. She read Freud and Jung and everything, and was always shaking. She's my older sister. You got to understand this. You can't just you just can't slide through life. You got to know these things. The uninvestigated life is not worth living. Is my sister's motto.
In this life, I was born and raised in the Jewish faith, and I read Sadowsky's and the sources. And he talks about Jesus and the roaster and Muhammad, but I never see any mention of Judaism.
Buddhism?
Judaism. What do you know about Baba's relation to Judaism?
There were a lot of Jewish people in the group, and so on.
Didn't Bob say anything about Abraham being a perfect messenger, right? Is that right?
About Abraham, Moses.
What? Abraham was an avatar?
I know it.
Val just said that.
Minor incarnations?
Yeah.
My sister just cued me. My sister with the brain just cued me and said,
Andy York helped.
okay, and Andy originated. Baba said, I belong to no religion.
All religions belong to me.
All religions. You should have been up there.
I just wanted to know what affiliation or what knowledge you had about with relation to Judaism because of all this other
No, I don't even know what his affiliation with the Greeks are, and I'm Greek. Adele.
Also, Baba said religion must go.
Come, yes.
And if Baba had ever really was trying to make a point about religion, he certainly did, but decrying rituals, ceremonials, and all those things, they're separated and excluded. As anyone might all that to himself.
There was a Jewish woman at Marizot, and she asked why Baba never used the word Yahweh, which is the Hebrew word for God, in his references to the names of God. And Erich said that Yahweh was another word for Almighty God, which is used in the Christian tradition, and therefore that the Jewish tradition was to be seen that Baba would speak in terms of Christ, or in terms of God Almighty. It finally didn't seem to feel that Baba was excluding Judaism.
No, I never got the feeling Baba excluded anything. Nobody and nothing. Everything, he loved everybody and everything incredibly. His judgments about anybody, what they look like, what their preferences, anything, had nothing to do with who they were and what Baba wanted, about how we experience Baba.
I often hear of people being jealous of others about his present teacher. Did you have that experience?
Oh, yes. And Baba asked me, said, have you felt lust yet? Oh, yes. This one was right up against Baba, and I'm sure in Myrtle Beach especially. What's her name? Anita would hold the umbrella over Baba, and somebody else would be in and out of the room cabin all the time, and there he was sitting outside. Sure. We are human. Gross.
When Baba dropped the body, what effect did that have on you? Were you taken greatly by surprise? And what effect was it?
He warned us for so long about it. It wasn't a surprise, but it was like the whole world fell out from under you. And I didn't realize it at the time. We tried to keep a stiff upper lip. I did. I tried to be brave, and Baba said, when the master goes, if you cry, it's like his life was wasted, so we tried to be brave. I remember an interesting thing that happened. The following night, I took my dog out. It must have been midnight. I couldn't sleep. I took my dog out to the side yard and was walking him around. I looked down the hill, and all the lights were on in town. And this was a work week, I think. And all the lights were on all the way down the hill. And I talked to people days later, and they all said, funny, I couldn't sleep the other night. The moon wasn't full or anything. But they all said, I couldn't sleep. So there was an effect all over, I guess. And I didn't really feel the effect until I read Kitty's book. And I read about Bob dropping his body, and that was how many years later. And I cried. Oh God, I miss him so terribly. Our lives completely revolved around being with him, and we waited for family letters, we waited for newsletters, we waited for the next meeting with him. And then suddenly, even though he warned us, he was out of the picture physically, and we thought, well, now we're on our own. Again, I was going back to this, I'm on my own again. And it's taken us a while to realize that we're not on our own, and we see the young Baba people coming. It's been absolutely incredible to see you come without having met them. It really is.
Oh, so what does your father think about you coming here now?
We didn't tell him. You think we tell him? He probably knows he's got his spies, I suppose. He's probably on the answering machine with 20 messages right now dumping on us again.
Also, in 58, did you have personal interviews with Robert? Pokemon? When you first, one more question, when you first met Robert, did you physically touch Robert a little bit? I mean, because the second time you had.
No, not the first time, except for handing me the grape. He may have held my hand as he handed me the grape, because he used to take people's hands and the grape or the candy or whatever. So he may have touched my hand, but I don't remember.
Could you tell me what your thoughts were about the grape?
I didn't know very much about masters. I got both times when he gave me a grape, the stem was on it, just a little short piece. And each time I walked out, I looked at the grape and I thought, should I eat the stem too? And I thought, that's stupid. And I took the stem off and ate it. And then a year later I found out, usually when a master gives somebody something to eat, they'll eat even the wrapper. So the thought even occurred to me without having read anything or known anything. But the wonderful mind, had to step in and say, that's stupid.
How does Baba and the perfect masters inside who becomes not realized with the time?
What's that?
How does Baba or the perfect masters inside who becomes not realized with the time?
Any other questions? I have no idea. I don't even know what Bob wants me to do the next 2 minutes. Me.
Did you get married or not?
No.
Not say anything about that.
Me? Get married, have a man control my life? No way.
Monday night meeting at Fred Ellis in New York, it seems like an awful lot of people just encourage, what it's really do. Can you just kind of, what would be a typical Monday night meeting there be like? How many people would show up? Or what
10, 15 people. We'd read from God Speaks or one of the books. We'd have 5 minutes of silence and turn out the lights and just meditate. Which the monkey really played, boy. And then Fred and Ella were always such wonderful hosts and hostesses. They were so gracious. They'd serve something afterwards. Then we'd go out and eat hot dogs besides afterwards. But they were so loving and so sweet. I don't know how many of you ever met them. They were so dear. And they were just like a magnet drawing us to Baba. Yes, very loving parents. 67th Street on the east side, and they were in a little brownstone building that belonged to Manhattan House. And they rather small apartment. We had the meetings there. They used to line up chairs, and we'd have a reader, or read the family letters, anything like that. Then afterwards, after my family got to sing with the detectives, and Fred almost lost his job, they moved across the way to Manhattan House, which is the big building, and we couldn't have the meetings there anymore. But Fred almost lost his job because of that. And then my friend Henry and Keisha. Because of the detective, sure. They went in. They had to go to his employer, and inquire about this man Fred and the drugs and all that was going on in his organization. But our friend Henry Kashouti and his wife, they turned Henry in. My parents turned him into the FBI. And he was a lawyer, and he was, up and coming and everything. And they had to go see an FBI agent quite a few times. Turned out the FBI agent knew about Bob, and the whole thing was just forgotten. He opened the drawer, said, "You mean this man?" and pulled out. He had the universal message in his drawer. Okay. A few weeks ago, I was suffering terribly again because of my father and his craziness. And I pulled out this and found it. It said, "If you make me your real father, all differences and contentions between you and all personal problems in connection with your lives will become dissolved in the ocean of my love." J. Bob.